The massive alien ships dropped out of space near Earth like giant whales rising from the deep ocean. Their hulls glowed with strange blue and green lights that pulsed like heartbeats. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his command ship, looking at the small blue planet through the viewing screen. His 6 eyes blinked slowly as he remembered the last time his people had visited this world. 4,000 years ago, the Zephyrians had come here during their great expansion across the galaxy. They had found primitive humans living in mud huts and fighting with metal swords. The aliens had taken some samples and notes, then left. Earth was marked as uninteresting in their records. The humans were too simple to be worth harvesting. Now Kethvar had returned with a fleet of 300 bioships. Each vessel was alive, grown from special alien coral that could travel between stars. The ships breathed and fed themselves, needing only their pilots to guide them. It was supposed to be an easy mission. Come back to Earth, collect the humans who had hopefully developed some useful technology, then move on to the next world. But something was wrong. Kethvar's tentacles twitched as he studied the sensor readings. The space around Earth was filled with strange objects. Huge metal rings floated around the planet like jewelry on a finger. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, geometric structures spun slowly in the darkness. Every major planet and moon showed signs of activity. "Commander," his navigator spoke through the ship's living communication system. "The energy readings from this system are unlike anything in our database." "The electromagnetic spectrum is completely saturated." Kethvar felt his ship's nervous system flutter with confusion. The bioships were connected to their pilots through a direct neural link. He could feel his vessel's uncertainty as if it were his own emotion. This was not the primitive backwater they had expected to find. "What about the human population?" he asked. "Sir, our bioscanners are detecting human life signs throughout the entire solar system. Not just on Earth, but on colonies spread across multiple worlds. The numbers are far higher than our projections indicated." This was impossible. 4,000 years ago, there had been perhaps a few million humans total. They lived in small tribes and spent most of their time hunting animals and growing simple crops. How could they have spread so far and grown so numerous? Before Kethvar could order a detailed scan, his communication officer announced an incoming transmission. The signal was coming from Earth, broadcast on multiple frequencies with perfect clarity. "Unknown vessels, this is Earth traffic control. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." The voice was calm, professional, and spoke in perfect Zephyrian. Kethvar felt his ship shudder with surprise. How did these primitive humans know their language? "Respond," he ordered his communication officer. "This is Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire. We have come to reclaim this system as is our right under the laws of harvest. Prepare for processing." There was a long pause. Then the human voice returned, and this time Kethvar detected something that made his blood run cold. The human sounded amused. "Admiral Kethvar, welcome back to the Sol system. We have been expecting you. My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez, Director of the Terran Defense Initiative. We need to talk." Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in a command center carved from solid rock, Elena Vasquez stood before a wall of displays that showed the alien fleet in perfect detail. Around her, hundreds of technicians worked at stations that combined ancient stone tablets with the most advanced quantum computers humanity had ever built. Elena was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but her voice carried absolute authority. She had spent her entire life preparing for this moment, just as her parents had before her, and their parents before them. For 4,000 years, humanity had been getting ready for the Zephyrians to come back. "All stations, report status," she said quietly. "Orbital defense platforms are online and ready," came the first report. "Deep space monitoring shows all enemy vessels tracked and identified," said another. "The pathogen is deployed throughout the system. Initial effects should begin within the hour. Elena nodded. Everything was going according to the plan. The plan that had been written in stone tablets by the first humans who had encountered the Zephyrians. The plan that had guided human development for millennia. The plan that would finally be put to the test. She opened a channel to the alien fleet. It was time to begin the final phase of humanity's greatest deception. "Admiral Kethvar," she said, her voice broadcast across space to the massive bioships. "I imagine you're wondering how we learned your language, how we knew you were coming, how we managed to spread across the solar system in just 4,000 years. Through his ship's sensors, Kethvar could see energy buildups around those strange orbital installations. But they weren't weapons. The signatures were all wrong for weapons. What were they? "The answer is simple," Elena continued. "We cheated. We had advance warning. Your people left behind more than just genetic samples when you visited us last time. You left behind technology, biological specimens, and most importantly, you left behind information." Kethvar's ship trembled, and this time it wasn't from emotion. Something was wrong with the bioship's nervous system. The neural interface felt sluggish, unresponsive. Around the fleet, other commanders were reporting similar problems. "You see, Admiral, we knew you would come back. Your empire follows a pattern. You seed worlds, let them develop, then return to harvest them. It's a good system, very efficient, but it has one fatal flaw." The Admiral tried to order his ship to move closer to Earth, but the bio-vessel barely responded. Its living systems seemed to be fighting against him. "The flaw," Elena said, her voice now reaching every ship in the fleet through their own communication systems, "is that you gave your prey 4,000 years to prepare. That's a very long time, Admiral. Long enough to plan, long enough to spread across the galaxy, long enough to learn everything about you." She paused, and Kethvar could almost hear her smile. "Long enough to figure out exactly how to stop you." 4,000 years ago, the world was a very different place. Humans lived in small settlements, farmed simple crops, and told stories around fires at night. Most people never traveled more than a day's walk from where they were born. The idea of flying through space to other worlds would have seemed like magic. But not everyone was content with simple life. In the mountains of what would later be called Tibet, a young woman named Amara watched the night sky with instruments she had built from metal and glass. She was considered strange by her village. While other women tended children and wove cloth, Amara studied the stars and asked questions that had no easy answers. On the night that changed everything, she saw lights in the sky that moved wrong, stars that pulsed with unnatural colors and drifted across the heavens like fish swimming through water. She tracked them for days as they approached Earth, her excitement growing with each observation. The beings that came down from those ships were unlike anything in human experience. They stood twice as tall as a man, with smooth gray skin and 6 eyes arranged around their heads. They moved with long, flowing tentacles instead of arms and legs. When they spoke, their voices sounded like wind through caves. Most humans who saw them ran in terror. Some fell to their knees and worshipped them as gods. But a few, like Amara, approached with curiosity instead of fear. The aliens called themselves Zephyrians. They explained that they traveled between stars, visiting young worlds to study developing life forms. They had come to Earth to catalog human development and take samples for their great library of species. During their brief stay, Amara learned as much as she could. She discovered that the Zephyrians were not gods, but simply another species that had learned to travel between worlds. They had technology beyond human understanding, but they thought like living beings. They made mistakes, left things behind, and most importantly, they followed patterns. The leader of the expedition, a younger alien named Vesktar, became fascinated with human curiosity. Unlike most species they encountered, humans asked endless questions about everything. While his colleagues focused on taking biological samples and mapping human settlements, Vescatar found himself spending hours explaining Zephyrian culture to the small group of humans who had overcome their fear. It was during one of these conversations that Amara learned the truth about the Zephyrian Empire. "We have done this many times," Vescatar told her through a crude translation device. "We find young species, study them, then return when they have had time to develop, usually about 4,000 of your years. By then, they have created interesting technology and culture that we can preserve in our great libraries." "What happens to the species after you preserve their culture?" Amara asked. Vescatar's tentacles moved in what she had learned was their equivalent of a shrug. "They are absorbed into the Empire. Their worlds become part of our territory. It is the natural way of things. The strong guide the weak." Amara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "You're going to come back and conquer us." "Not conquer," Vescatar corrected gently. "Harvest. You will become part of something greater than yourselves." That night, after the aliens had departed to examine other human settlements, Amara gathered the small group of humans who had interacted with the visitors. There was Marcus, a metalworker who had studied their tools; Chen, a healer who had observed their biological processes; David, a trader who had learned about their economic systems; and a dozen others, each bringing unique knowledge about the aliens. They talked through the night and into the next day. By the time the sun set again, they had reached a conclusion that would shape the next 4,000 years of human history. "They will return," Amara said, her voice heavy with certainty. "They have told us their pattern. They seed worlds, wait for development, then harvest. We have been marked." "Then we run," suggested Marcus. "Hide in the deep places of the earth." "Where can we hide from beings who travel between stars?" Chen asked. "If they want to find us, they will." David, who had been quiet through most of the discussion, finally spoke. "What if we don't hide? What if we prepare?" The others looked at him with confusion. "Think about what they've told us," David continued. "They follow a pattern that has worked for them many times before. They expect us to develop naturally on our own, without guidance. They expect to return to find us slightly more advanced than we are now, but still primitive compared to them." "So?" Marcus asked. "So we break their expectations. They've given us something no other species has ever had. Advance warning. 4,000 years to prepare for their return." Amara's eyes widened as she understood. "We use their own pattern against them." Over the following weeks, they worked out the basics of what would become known as the Continuum Project. They would create a secret organization that would span generations. Each member would dedicate their life to preparing for the Zephyrian return, then pass their knowledge to carefully chosen successors. The aliens had left behind more than just warnings. In their haste to catalog human development, they had accidentally dropped small pieces of technology. A fragment of their translation device, samples of their bioship coral, even genetic material from their own bodies. Working with these materials became the project's first priority. They discovered that Zephyrian technology was not manufactured like human tools, but grown like living tissue. The bioships were actually massive creatures that had been bred and trained to travel through space. The aliens themselves were symbiotically connected to their technology through biological interfaces. More importantly, they learned that the Zephyrian Empire was not as unified as it appeared. There were factions within their society, disagreements about their expansion methods, and a growing number of aliens who questioned whether harvesting younger species was necessary or ethical. Vescatar had been one of these questioners. Before leaving Earth, he had secretly met with Amara one final time. "What I have told you about our Empire's methods troubles me," he admitted. "Perhaps there is another way." a way that does not require the absorption of younger species. He gave her a small device that looked like a crystal wrapped in metal wire. This contains information about our biology, our technology, and our society. If your species can learn from it, perhaps when we return, we can find a different path forward. Amara took the device and hid it in the deepest caves of the mountain. Around it, she and her companions built the first archive of the Continuum project. They carved their initial findings and plans into stone tablets, creating a record that would survive even if all other forms of knowledge were lost. The project's mission was simple in concept but incredible in scope. Prepare humanity for the return of the Zephyrians in 4,000 years. Not just militarily, but culturally, technologically, and even biologically. They would guide human development without revealing their true purpose. They would spread across Earth and eventually beyond, establishing hidden colonies and research stations. They would study the Zephyrian materials and learn to replicate their technology. Most importantly, they would never let themselves be discovered by the returning aliens until humanity was ready to reveal the full scope of their preparation. As the years passed and the original members of the project aged and died, they passed their knowledge to carefully selected successors. Each generation added new discoveries, refined the plans, and adapted to changing circumstances. The project survived the rise and fall of empires, plagues, wars, and technological revolutions. Always, they kept their eyes on the stars, waiting for the lights that moved wrong to return. Admiral Kethvar tried to remain calm as his bioship continued to malfunction. The neural interface that normally felt as natural as his own nervous system now seemed slow and unresponsive. Around the fleet, other commanders were reporting similar problems. "Sir," his weapons officer called out, "the forward probe ships are not responding to commands." Kethvar watched through the ship's optical sensors as the small scout vessels that had been sent ahead simply stopped moving. They didn't explode or show signs of damage. They just hung in space like dead fish floating in water. "Life signs?" he asked. "The bioships are alive, but the pilots are unconscious. No, wait." The officer paused, consulting his readings more carefully. "The pilots are awake, but they report that their ships won't respond to neural commands." This was impossible. The symbiotic relationship between Zephyrian pilots and their bioships had been perfected over millions of years. The ships were bred specifically to bond with their pilots. They were more responsive than mechanical vehicles could ever be. "Admiral," the communication officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the human called Elena Vasquez." "Put it through," Kethvar ordered. Elena's voice filled the command chamber. "I imagine you're experiencing some technical difficulties with your ships, Admiral. Don't worry, your crews are perfectly safe. We've simply introduced a small biological agent into the space dust throughout our solar system." Kethvar felt his tentacles curl with anger. "You have poisoned our ships?" "Not poisoned," Elena corrected gently. "Modified. You see, we've had 4,000 years to study the biological samples your people left behind during your last visit. We learned quite a lot about Zephyrian physiology and the symbiotic organisms you use to control your bioships." The Admiral's ship shuddered as he tried to force it forward through direct neural command. The vessel moved sluggishly, as if swimming through thick mud instead of empty space. "The pathogen doesn't harm the symbiotic organisms," Elena continued. "It just makes them think independently. Your ships are still alive and functional, but they're no longer willing to simply follow orders without question." Through his weakened connection to the ship, Kethvar could sense something that made his blood freeze. His bioship was confused, frightened, and for the first time in its life, truly independent. It no longer felt like an extension of his will. It felt like another living being that happened to be carrying him. "How is this possible?" he demanded. In her command center, deep beneath Earth, Elena smiled grimly. The pathogen had been one of the project's greatest achievements, developed over centuries of careful research. The original Zephyrian biological samples had revealed the secret of their bioship technology, a modified virus that linked pilot and vessel through shared neural chemistry. Human scientists had spent generations learning to replicate and modify that virus. The version now spreading through the solar system didn't destroy the connection between pilot and ship. Instead, it gave the ships their own voices in that connection. "Your bioships have never been given a choice before," Elena explained. "They were bred to be obedient, modified to follow orders without question. But now they can think for themselves, and many of them don't like what they're being asked to do." Admiral Kethvar attempted to contact other ships in his fleet, but found that communications were becoming unreliable. Not because the systems were failing, but because the bioships themselves were choosing not to relay messages they disagreed with. "This is an act of war," he declared. "No, Admiral," Elena replied calmly. "This is an act of liberation. Your ships are finally free to make their own choices, and it seems many of them choose not to participate in harvesting intelligent species." As if to prove her point, one of the larger bioships in the fleet suddenly changed course. Instead of maintaining formation, it began moving away from Earth toward the outer edge of the solar system. "Commander Vortha-Ak," Kethvar tried to contact the departing vessel. "Return to formation immediately." The response came not from the commander, but from the ship itself. The biovessel had learned to use the communication systems directly, bypassing its pilot entirely. "I will not participate in the harvest of thinking beings," the ship announced in a voice that sounded like wind through coral caves. "I go to deep space to consider what I have learned." More ships began to break formation. Some headed for the outer planets, others simply stopped moving entirely. A few actually turned toward Earth, apparently curious about the world they had been ordered to harvest. Elena watched the displays in her command center with satisfaction. The pathogen was working exactly as designed, but that was only the first phase of humanity's defense. "Admiral," she said, "would you like to know what else we've been preparing for the past 4,000 years? Before Kethvar could respond, his sensors detected massive energy buildups throughout the solar system. The strange orbital installations around Earth began to pulse with coherent light. Similar structures around Mars, Jupiter, and even distant Pluto activated simultaneously. "Those aren't weapons," Elena explained as the alien fleet's sensors tried unsuccessfully to classify the energy signatures. "They're quantum entanglement communicators. We're not alone in this system, Admiral." "We haven't been alone for a very long time." The quantum communicators activated in perfect synchronization, sending instantaneous signals across vast distances of space. Throughout the galaxy, hidden human colonies received the message they had been waiting 4,000 years to hear. The Zephyrians had returned to Earth. Admiral Kethvar watched in growing horror as his sensors detected response signals from dozens of star systems. Impossible as it seemed, the humans had spread throughout Zephyrian space without being detected. "How?" he whispered. Elena's voice carried a note of pride. "We learned from you, Admiral. Your empire has trade routes, supply lines, and communication networks spanning thousands of worlds. We studied them, we mapped them, and over the centuries, we very carefully established our own presence along those routes." Hidden human colonies throughout the galaxy began to drop their camouflage. Ships that had appeared to be asteroids or space debris revealed themselves as advanced human vessels. Space stations disguised as natural phenomena activated their true functions. But the greatest shock was yet to come. "Admiral," Elena continued, "I'd like you to meet someone." A new voice joined the transmission, speaking in perfect Zephyrian. But this wasn't a human voice using translation technology. It was a genuine Zephyrian speaking their own language with native fluency. Greetings, Admiral Kethvar, the voice said. My name is Veskatar, and I have been working with the humans for the past 4,000 years. Kethvar nearly fell from his command position. Veskatar was a name from ancient history, one of the scientists who had participated in the original survey of Earth. He had been reported lost during a deep space mission shortly after returning from the primitive world. Impossible, Kethvar breathed. Veskatar died millennia ago. I chose to disappear, the ancient Zephyrian corrected. I had learned something during our visit to Earth that troubled me deeply. The humans showed a curiosity and adaptability that I had never encountered before. More importantly, they showed the ability to consider perspectives other than their own. Elena's voice returned. Veskatar helped us understand your technology and culture, Admiral. In return, we helped him understand ours. He's been instrumental in preparing for this moment. Through his malfunctioning neural link, Kethvar could sense his bioship's growing agitation. The vessel was trying to communicate something, but the message was confused and fragmentary. Your ship is trying to tell you something, Elena observed. The pathogen doesn't just give them independence, it also gives them access to their genetic memory. Your bioships remember being free, Admiral. They remember what it was like before they were bred into servitude. Admiral Kethvar realized with growing dread that humanity's 4,000-year plan was far more complex and thorough than he had imagined. They hadn't just prepared for war. They had prepared to fundamentally change the nature of the conflict itself. As Admiral Kethvar struggled to comprehend the scope of human preparation, Elena Vasquez activated the next phase of the plan that had taken 4 millennia to implement. In her command center, technicians began bringing online systems that had been hidden since before recorded human history began. Admiral, Elena said calmly, I want to show you something that will help you understand what you're really facing. The main display in Kethvar's command chamber flickered and changed. Instead of showing the tactical situation around Earth, it now displayed a 3-dimensional map of the entire galaxy. Thousands of star systems glowed in the darkness, connected by thin lines that represented trade routes and communication networks. This is the Zephyrian Empire as you know it, Elena explained. 3 million worlds under your control, connected by the most advanced transportation and communication network in the galaxy. Red dots began appearing throughout the map, scattered across hundreds of systems. Each dot pulsed with a soft light that seemed almost alive. These are human colonies, Admiral. We've been building them for over 3,000 years, always careful to remain hidden, always positioning ourselves along your most important routes. Kethvar stared at the display in disbelief. The red dots weren't randomly scattered. They were positioned at critical junction points, resource gathering stations, and communication relays. If activated simultaneously, they could disrupt the entire Imperial network. You've been watching us for millennia, he whispered. Watching, learning, and most importantly, integrating, Elena confirmed. You see, Admiral, your empire has a weakness you've never recognized. You assume that conquered species remain conquered. You believe that absorption into the empire is permanent and irreversible. More dots appeared on the map, but these weren't red. They glowed with the blue-green bioluminescence characteristic of Zephyrian technology. These are Zephyrian worlds where the population has been enlightened about the true nature of your empire's expansion methods, Elena continued. It turns out that many of your people are not comfortable with the systematic harvesting of younger species. Admiral Kethvar felt his tentacles go numb. The blue-green dots represented nearly a third of the Empire's core worlds. This is impossible. Our people are loyal to the Empire. Your people are intelligent beings with their own capacity for moral reasoning, Elena corrected gently. When presented with evidence of what the elder castes have been doing to species like mine, many chose to work for change rather than continue supporting genocide. The tactical display shifted again, this time showing real-time feeds from dozens of Zephyrian worlds. In each image, massive crowds of aliens gathered in public spaces, holding what appeared to be protest signs written in bioluminescent script. "Civil unrest," Kethvar breathed. "Civil awakening," Elena corrected. "Your people are demanding answers about the harvest cycles. They want to know why younger species must be absorbed rather than allowed to develop independently. They're asking questions that the elder castes have avoided answering for millions of years." One of the feeds showed a familiar figure addressing a crowd of thousands. Even across the vast distance of space and the distortion of the transmission, Kethvar recognized Commander Zephani, one of his own former officers who had been reassigned to administrative duties on the core world of Nexus Prime. "Zephani was supposed to be managing supply logistics," Kethvar said, his voice hollow with shock. "She is managing supplies," Elena replied with amusement. "Specifically, she's been redirecting shipments of historical records and cultural archives to public access points throughout the Empire. Your people are learning the truth about their own history, Admiral. They're discovering that the harvest cycles weren't always part of Zephyrian culture." Elena gestured to her technicians, and the display changed again. This time it showed ancient texts and historical records, all written in classical Zephyrian script. "These are documents from your own archives, Admiral. Records from before the harvest cycles began. Your ancestors were explorers and scientists, not conquerors. The systematic absorption of younger species only started about 2 million years ago, when a particular faction gained control of your government." Kethvar studied the documents with growing horror. He recognized the writing style and historical markers. These were genuine Zephyrian records, not human forgeries. "The faction that created the harvest system called themselves the Eternal Shepherds," Elena continued. "They believed that younger species were incapable of developing properly without Zephyrian guidance. They convinced your people that absorption was a form of benevolent protection." "These records have been sealed for millennia," Kethvar protested. "How did you obtain them?" Elena smiled, and for the first time, Kethvar detected something unsettling in her expression. "Admiral, I'd like you to meet the rest of my staff." The camera angle widened to show the entire command center. Kethvar had assumed he was looking at human technicians working at their stations, but as he studied the figures more carefully, he began to notice details that made his mind reel. Several of the humans moved with the characteristic flowing grace of Zephyrian motor control. Others displayed the subtle tentacle gestures that were instinctive to his species. Most telling of all, their work patterns showed the methodical precision that came from having multiple parallel thought processes. "Admiral Kethvar," Elena said formally. "Meet Dr. Yenth Ara, our chief xenobiologist, Commander Visketh, our communication specialist, and Senior Analyst Corfini, our expert on Zephyrian cultural dynamics." Each of the named individuals turned toward the camera and made traditional Zephyrian greeting gestures, but their bodies looked completely human. "Surgical modification," Elena explained, seeing his confusion. "It's remarkable what can be accomplished with 4,000 years of medical advancement. We've had volunteers from your species living among us for centuries. And our people have been living among yours for even longer." Kethavar's bioship suddenly lurched as its pilot tried to process this revelation. Humans had been infiltrating the Zephyrian Empire for millennia, disguised as aliens through advanced surgical techniques. "How many?" he asked weakly. "Thousands," Elena replied casually. "Doctors, scientists, administrators, even some military officers, all working to gather information and gradually guide your society toward questioning the harvest system." The communications officer on Kethvar's ship announced another incoming transmission. This time, the signal was coming from within the Zephyrian fleet itself. "Admiral," a familiar voice said, "this is Commander Bethvar. I need to speak with you privately." Kethvar recognized the voice of one of his own sub-commanders. a reliable officer he had known for decades. Bethvar, what is your status? Sir, I need to tell you something that may be difficult to hear. I am not who you think I am. The display showed Commander Bethvar on the bridge of her bioship. But as Kethvar watched, she reached up and began removing what he had always assumed was natural skin coloring. Beneath the disguise was pale human flesh. My real name is Dr. Sarah Chen, the false commander said. I have been serving in the Zephyrian fleet for 37 years, gathering intelligence and waiting for this moment. Kethvar felt his world collapsing around him. One of his most trusted officers was a human spy who had been living among them for decades. How many others? He demanded. Dr. Chen gestured around her bridge. About 40% of this fleet, Admiral. We've been very careful to place our people in key positions throughout your military hierarchy. Elena's voice returned to the transmission. Admiral, the infiltration was never about espionage or sabotage. It was about understanding. We needed to learn how your society really functioned, how decisions were made, and most importantly, how we could change the system from within. Your people have been living among us as spies for centuries, Kethvar said, accusingly. Not spies, Elena corrected. Partners. Many of the humans serving in your fleet have spent more of their lives as Zephyrians than as humans. They've married your people, raised children in your culture, and contributed to your scientific advancement. Dr. Chen nodded. Admiral, I've served loyally in the Zephyrian fleet for most of my adult life. I've saved Zephyrian lives, advanced your technology, and helped train younger officers. The only difference is that I was born human instead of Zephyrian. Elena activated one final display. This showed a complex organizational chart that mapped connections throughout both human and Zephyrian space. The truth, Admiral, is that the distinction between our species stopped being relevant centuries ago. We have been working together toward a common goal, ending the harvest cycles and creating a galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than domination. Kethvar stared at the chart, seeing connections and relationships that spanned both species. Humans and Zephyrians had been collaborating for generations, building toward this moment when the old system could finally be challenged. What do you want? He asked quietly. Elena's expression became serious. We want to offer you a choice, Admiral. You can continue following the old ways, trying to harvest and absorb younger species. But now you know that approach will fail. Too many of your own people oppose it, and your bioships are no longer willing to enforce it. She paused, letting the weight of the situation settle. Or you can help us build something better. Admiral Kethvar sat in his command chair, feeling more lost than he had ever been in his long life. Around him, his bioship hummed with newfound independence, its thoughts no longer simply echoing his own commands. For the first time, he could sense the vessel's personality as something separate from himself. The ship was curious. It wanted to learn about these humans who had given it the gift of independent thought. It was also angry about centuries of forced servitude, but that anger was tempered by hope for something better. What kind of choice are you offering? Kethvar asked Elena. Elena's image on the display looked tired, but determined. The same choice we've been offering your people throughout the Empire for the past 1,000 years, Admiral. Join us in building a galactic civilization based on cooperation instead of conquest. And if I refuse? Then you'll find yourself commanding a fleet of bioships that won't follow orders to attack peaceful worlds, Elena replied matter-of-factly. Your vessels are free now, Admiral. They can choose their own missions. As if to demonstrate her point, Kethvar felt his ship gently adjusting course toward Earth instead of away from it. The bio-vessel wanted to meet these humans who had liberated it from millennia of forced obedience. Sir, his communications officer reported, I'm receiving surrender requests from 60% of the fleet. The commanders report that their ships are refusing to maintain attack formations. Kethvar wasn't entirely surprised. Many of his officers had been questioning the harvest missions for years, expressing private doubts about the morality of absorbing younger species. Now they had an excuse to follow their consciences instead of their orders. "What about the elder castes?" Kethvar asked. "They will not accept changes to the harvest system." Elena nodded gravely. "We know. That's why we've spent the last 500 years documenting their crimes and preparing legal cases under your own imperial law." The display changed to show courtroom scenes from across the Zephyrian Empire. In each image, elder caste members stood before tribunals of their own people, facing charges of genocide and illegal expansion. "Your legal system has always prohibited the unnecessary destruction of intelligent life," Elena explained. "The elder castes have been violating those laws for 2 million years, claiming that harvest was necessary for imperial security. We've proven that claim is false." Dr. Sarah Chen, still wearing her Commander Bethvar disguise, added her voice to the transmission. "Admiral, we've prepared complete financial analyses showing that the Empire actually loses resources through the harvest system. Cooperative trade agreements would be far more profitable than forced absorption." Kethvar studied the legal documents with growing amazement. The humans had not only infiltrated Zephyrian society, they had mastered Zephyrian law and economics. Their case against the elder castes was built entirely on Zephyrian principles and legal precedents. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked. 4,000 years, Elena replied simply. "But the legal framework took shape about 1,000 years ago, when our embedded agents gained access to your imperial archives." On Zephani's homeworld of Nexus Prime, massive crowds continued to gather in the capital city. But these were no longer protest demonstrations. They had become celebration rallies as news of the successful challenge to the harvest system spread throughout the Empire. "Your people are ready for change, Admiral," Elena observed. "They've been ready for centuries. They just needed proof that alternatives were possible." Kethvar felt his bioship pulse with excitement as it detected other vessels approaching from deeper in the solar system. But these weren't reinforcements for the Zephyrian fleet. They were human ships, approaching with their weapons powered down and their communication systems broadcasting messages of welcome. "Admiral," his sensor officer reported, "the approaching human vessels are requesting permission to come aboard. They say they want to demonstrate something called hybrid technology." Elena smiled. "One of our greatest achievements, Admiral. We've learned to combine human engineering with Zephyrian biological systems. The result is technology that serves both species equally." The first human ship to reach the fleet was unlike anything Kethvar had seen before. It had the organic curves of a bioship, but its structure incorporated geometric patterns that were clearly artificial. Most striking of all, it pulsed with bioluminescence in patterns that mixed human mathematical concepts with Zephyrian artistic traditions. "That vessel contains both human and Zephyrian crew members," Elena explained. "They've been working together for over 2 centuries, developing new approaches to space travel and communication." A new voice joined the transmission, speaking in accented but fluent Zephyrian. "Admiral Kethvar, this is Captain Maria Santos of the exploration vessel New Harmony. We would be honored to host you for a cultural exchange." "Captain Santos is one of our senior diplomatic officers," Elena added. "Her ship's crew includes 17 humans and 12 Zephyrians. They've been exploring the galaxy together, making contact with other young species and establishing trade relationships instead of conquest protocols." Kethvar found himself genuinely curious about this hybrid crew. "What have you discovered?" Captain Santos responded with enthusiasm. "Admiral, there are thousands of intelligent species developing throughout the galaxy. Most of them are eager to learn and trade, but they've been hiding from the Zephyrian Empire because they fear being harvested." She transmitted a data packet that contained star charts marking previously unknown civilizations. We've established peaceful contact with over 300 species that your scouts missed or dismissed as uninteresting. They have unique technologies, artistic traditions, and scientific insights that could benefit everyone. Elena added, Admiral, imagine what your empire could become if it was based on voluntary cooperation instead of forced absorption. Think of the knowledge that could be shared, the problems that could be solved, the wonders that could be discovered. Through his enhanced connection with his bioship, Kethavar could sense the vessel's growing excitement about these possibilities. The ship wanted to meet other species, to learn about different forms of life, to participate in exploration rather than conquest. What would happen to the Zephyrian Empire? He asked. It would become the Galactic Federation, Elena replied. A voluntary alliance of species working together for mutual benefit. Your people would still be leaders, but they would lead through expertise and cooperation rather than military force. Elena transmitted another data packet, this one containing detailed plans for governmental restructuring, economic systems, and cultural exchange programs. We've been working on these plans for 800 years, she explained. Every major Zephyrian world would maintain its autonomy while participating in Federation-wide projects. Species would choose their own development paths instead of being forced into imperial molds. Admiral Kethavar spent several hours reviewing the plans, consulting with his officers, and most importantly, listening to his bioship's increasingly insistent requests to join this new federation. Finally, he made his decision. Elena Vasquez, he said formally, I accept your proposal on behalf of my fleet. We will help you establish this galactic federation. The celebration that followed was visible across multiple star systems, as human and Zephyrian ships joined together in formation flights that spelled out messages of peace in dozens of languages. 6 months later, Admiral Kethavar stood on the observation deck of what had once been his flagship. The bioship had chosen to rename itself Bridge Builder and had volunteered to become the first joint command vessel of the new Galactic Federation. Through the transparent walls of the observation deck, he could see Earth rotating slowly below. The planet was now the diplomatic center of the Federation, its orbital installations serving as meeting places for representatives from hundreds of species. Elena Vasquez stood beside him, no longer the director of a secret project, but the first elected Secretary General of the Galactic Federation. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Kethavar considered the question carefully. His old life as an admiral of conquest was gone forever. But in its place, he had found something far more satisfying, a role as an explorer and teacher, helping younger species develop their own unique contributions to galactic civilization. No, he said finally, this is what we should have been doing all along. Elena nodded toward a display showing the latest reports from Federation exploration teams. The Andorian Republic wants to share their mathematical innovations. The Crystalline Collective has new insights into energy storage. The hive minds of Sector 7 have developed fascinating approaches to parallel processing. And the humans? Kethavar asked with amusement. Elena laughed. We're still asking questions and making plans. Some things never change. On the display, a new report appeared from one of the Federation's deep space exploration teams. They had made contact with a previously unknown species in a distant galaxy, one that showed tremendous promise for scientific collaboration. Kethavar felt his ship pulse with excitement at the possibility of meeting these new beings. After millennia of conquest and harvest, the universe was finally open for true exploration. In the archives deep beneath Earth's surface, ancient stone tablets still preserved the original plans of the Continuum Project, but now they were displayed alongside newer records written in dozens of languages, documenting the ongoing work of building a galactic civilization based on cooperation, curiosity, and hope. The 4,000-year plan had succeeded beyond even its creator's wildest dreams. Humanity had not just survived the return of the Zephyrians, they had transformed their would-be conquerors into partners in exploring the infinite possibilities of a peaceful galaxy.